What started as an ordinary day for the Indiana Fever suddenly turned into something much bigger, and almost no one saw the sequence of events coming. At first, the spotlight was on Caitlin Clark unveiling a fresh new Nike colorway, giving fans something exciting to talk about and another glimpse at the growing impact of her signature brand. For a brief moment, that was the story everyone expected to dominate the conversation. But within hours, the mood shifted completely. News broke that Aliyah Boston would miss the Fever's matchup with the Sparks, while Clark would be the one sitting out the following night's game as the team managed the back-to-back schedule. Before fans had even finished reacting to that update, another headline arrived as the Fever released a statement following a congressional letter sent to WNBA leadership regarding player safety. Suddenly, three separate stories were colliding into one non-stop discussion. What began as excitement over a new shoe had turned into a much larger conversation about roster decisions, public messaging, and the growing spotlight surrounding every move the Indiana Fever make. And that's where this story became far more complicated than anyone expected. For a little while, the conversation was exactly what fans expected it to be. Caitlin Clark's latest Nike colorway immediately caught people's attention, with the bright yellow design standing out far more than the earlier version that many fans thought looked too ordinary. Social media quickly filled with close-up images, reactions, and comparisons, with plenty of supporters saying this release felt more like the kind of signature shoe they had been waiting to see. The bold colors, the cleaner look, and the approachable price point all added to the excitement, making it feel like another milestone in Clark's rapidly growing influence both on and off the court. But that excitement barely had time to settle before the headlines changed again. As fans were still talking about the new shoes, attention shifted almost instantly to the Fever's latest availability report. Instead of discussing sneakers, people were suddenly debating who would actually be on the floor. Aliyah Boston being ruled out for one game and Clark expected to sit the next transformed the conversation overnight. What had started as a celebration of Clark's growing brand suddenly became a much broader discussion about lineup decisions, player health, and how the Fever were choosing to navigate one of the busiest stretches of their schedule. That was the moment the story stopped being about a shoe release and started becoming something much bigger. The biggest shift in the conversation came when the Fever clarified how they planned to handle their back-to-back games. Aliyah Boston would miss the first matchup, while Caitlin Clark would be available. Then, the roles would reverse the following night, with Boston returning and Clark expected to sit. From a basketball standpoint, the decision fit a strategy many teams use during demanding stretches of the season. Managing workloads can help reduce fatigue and give players a better chance to stay healthy over the long haul, especially when games come with very little recovery time in between. But for many fans, the reaction wasn't centered on the medical reasoning. It was about the experience of buying a ticket months in advance, traveling to the arena, and hoping to watch one of the league's biggest stars in person. When a player like Clark isn't on the court, it changes the atmosphere of the entire event. For some supporters, that's simply part of modern professional sports, where organizations prioritize long-term health over a single night's entertainment. Others see it differently, believing that if a player is healthy enough to compete, fans should have every opportunity to watch them play. That's where opinions quickly began to split. One side viewed the decision as smart planning designed to protect two cornerstone players over the course of a long season. The other saw another example of how workload management can leave fans feeling frustrated, especially when marquee players are unavailable despite not being listed with a new injury. As those two perspectives collided, the discussion grew far beyond one back-to-back series and into a larger debate about balancing player health with the expectations that come with being the face of a franchise. As the news spread, the conversation across social media became far more intense than the lineup update itself. Supporters who favored the decision argued that protecting key players should always come first, especially during a packed schedule where fatigue can increase the risk of injuries. From their perspective, the Fever were thinking beyond one night's result and focusing on keeping both Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston available for the challenges still ahead. In today's game, many believe smart workload management is simply part of building a successful season rather than a sign of weakness. Others weren't nearly as convinced. They pointed out that fans often plan trips, spend significant money on tickets, and wait months for the opportunity to see stars like Clark in person. Learning that a marquee player will sit because of a scheduled rest day can leave those supporters feeling disappointed, even if the reasoning makes sense from a basketball standpoint. For them, the issue isn't just about one game, it's about the experience fans expect when they invest their time and money. That difference in perspective is exactly why the debate continued to grow. Some saw responsible long-term planning, while others saw a trend that has become increasingly common across professional basketball. Before long, the discussion wasn't really about one back-to-back anymore. It had evolved into a broader conversation about player health, fan expectations, and the difficult balance every organization has to strike when its biggest stars are constantly in the spotlight. Just as the discussion around the lineup began to settle, another development pulled the Fever back into the spotlight. A congressional letter directed at WNBA leadership called for answers regarding player safety and the league's handling of on-court issues. The focus of that letter was the league office itself, asking leadership to address broader concerns rather than singling out one individual team. Even so, the timing immediately drew attention because it arrived during another period of intense conversation surrounding the Fever and their high-profile roster. Not long afterward, the Indiana Fever released a public statement emphasizing that neither the organization nor Caitlin Clark had been involved with the congressional group behind the letter. The team also reiterated that player safety has remained a priority in its conversations with the league and stated that it would continue supporting both its players and the standards expected across the WNBA. That response quickly became a story of its own. Some fans viewed the statement as a reasonable effort to clarify the organization's position and prevent unnecessary speculation. Others questioned why the Fever felt it was important to respond when the congressional letter had been directed toward league leadership rather than the franchise itself. Those differing interpretations fueled another round of debate online, but they remained exactly that, interpretations. The confirmed facts were straightforward: the letter was sent to WNBA leadership, and the Fever chose to issue a public response. Everything beyond those facts became part of the wider conversation surrounding one of the league's most closely watched teams. By the end of the day, it was clear these weren't isolated headlines anymore. A new signature shoe, lineup changes, and an organizational statement had all merged into one much larger conversation about the Indiana Fever and the spotlight that now follows almost every decision they make. That's the reality of having one of the league's biggest stars. Routine updates that might pass quietly for other teams suddenly become national talking points when Caitlin Clark is involved. At the center of that discussion is a balancing act that has become increasingly difficult. The Fever have to think about player health, long-term success, and managing expectations inside the locker room. At the same time, they know millions of fans are watching every announcement, every injury report, and every public statement, often searching for meaning beyond the words themselves. Even when the organization explains a decision, the interpretation rarely ends there. That growing attention has created an environment where every move is examined from multiple angles. Some people see careful planning, while others see missed opportunities to communicate more clearly. Some believe the team is simply protecting its future, while others feel the public deserves greater transparency when major decisions affect the league's biggest attractions. And that's what makes this story bigger than a single game or a single statement. It's about the pressure that comes with constant visibility, where every decision is analyzed, every response is scrutinized, and every headline becomes part of a much larger narrative that continues to follow the Fever throughout the season. As the Fever move on to their next games, it's becoming increasingly clear that this conversation isn't ending anytime soon. What started as separate headlines has evolved into an ongoing storyline that stretches far beyond one shoe release, one lineup decision, or one organizational statement. Every development now seems to build on the last, creating a cycle where one update immediately leads to another, keeping the team at the center of the basketball world. That level of attention reflects just how much interest surrounds Caitlin Clark and the Fever. Routine announcements that might once have gone unnoticed are now dissected by fans, analysts, and media outlets from every angle. A player resting on the second night of a back-to-back becomes a league-wide debate. A statement intended to clarify the team's position becomes another headline of its own. Even an exciting product reveal can quickly fade into the background as new questions emerge. For now, there are still plenty of storylines unfolding, and none of them appear fully resolved. The conversations about player health, organizational communication, and the expectations that come with being one of the WNBA's biggest attractions continue to overlap. And as long as the spotlight remains this bright, every decision the Fever make is likely to fuel another chapter in a story that keeps getting bigger.